Hollywood has seen its share of unlikely love stories, but few turned heads quite like this one. A global movie star, one of the most unpredictable, most talked about actors of his generation, walked into a restaurant one evening and walked out with something no blockbuster had given him before. A genuine connection with a young Korean-American woman most people had never heard of. They married, they had a child, and then quietly it ended. So what really happened inside that marriage? Where is she today? And who has their son grown up to be? The answers are more layered than the headlines ever let on. By the early 2000s, Nicolas Cage was operating at a level that few actors ever reach. He had already won an Academy Award for his raw, devastating performance in Leaving Las Vegas. He had anchored some of the biggest action films of the decade, The Rock and Air Face Off. He was a household name on every continent, a performer who defied easy categorization, and a man whose personal life was never far from public conversation. He was also a Coppola, nephew of Francis Ford Coppola, which meant the spotlight on him carried the extra weight of Hollywood royalty. But with that status came relentless scrutiny. Every relationship he entered became tabloid material. Every decision he made, public or private, was analyzed, photographed, and debated. Nicolas Cage was not just famous, he was a cultural phenomenon, and that made his next chapter all the more unexpected. The year was 2004. Nicolas Cage was 40 years old, freshly out of a brief and highly publicized marriage to pop icon Lisa Marie Presley, which had lasted just over 3 months. He walked into a restaurant in Los Angeles and met a young woman named Alice Kim. She was 20 years old, Korean-American, working as a waitress. She was not an actress, not a model, not part of the entertainment world in any way. By all accounts, she was simply living her life, quietly, without ambition for fame or celebrity adjacency. What happened between them was not manufactured for cameras or shaped by publicists. By the time the world caught on, it had already become something real. Within months of meeting, Nicolas Cage and Alice Kim were married. The ceremony took place in August 2004 in a private setting in Northern California. It was small, intimate, and deliberately far from the spectacle that had surrounded his previous union. The contrast was impossible to ignore. Here was one of the most recognizable actors on the planet choosing a life, choosing a partner that existed entirely outside the world he occupied professionally. People who knew him well described it as intentional, like he was searching for something grounded. The reaction was immediate and predictable. Entertainment outlets ran the story with barely contained disbelief. The age gap, 20 years between them, drew commentary from every direction. The speed of the relationship raised eyebrows. And the fact that Alice Kim had no public profile whatsoever made her an object of intense curiosity, even as she clearly wanted nothing to do with that attention. Some people were skeptical. After the Lisa Marie Presley marriage had dissolved so quickly, many assumed this was another impulsive decision by a man who lived impulsively by nature. Others were more sympathetic. There was something almost romantic about the story if you let yourself see it that way. A man at the height of his fame choosing someone entirely removed from that world. Someone who presumably loved him for reasons that had nothing to do with box office receipts or award nominations. Cultural observers noted the significance of Alice's Korean-American background in a Hollywood landscape that rarely centered Asian women in these kinds of narratives, even adjacent ones. She was not given a voice in the coverage. She was, by and large, a supporting character in a story the media decided belonged to Nicolas Cage alone. What followed was something genuinely unusual for a celebrity of Cage's stature, a sustained period of domestic quiet. Alice Kim did not pursue acting. She did not launch a brand or seek out interviews. She stepped into the role of partner and eventually mother with what appeared to be complete sincerity and no desire for the spotlight. In October 2005, just over a year into their marriage, the couple welcomed a son. Nicolas Cage named him Kal-El Coppola Cage, Kal-El being the birth name of Superman in DC Comics. The name made headlines on its own, which was very much in keeping with who Nicolas Cage is as a person. Passionate, unfiltered, committed to the things he loves with a kind of wholehearted intensity that the world finds equal parts charming and eccentric. For the next decade, the couple maintained a remarkably low profile by Hollywood standards. Alice was occasionally photographed at public events alongside Cage, but she never sought attention. She never gave interviews. She was present, but deliberately, quietly so. Those who observed them during this period described a marriage that functioned, one that provided Cage with a kind of stability that his professional life often lacked, and that gave their son a mother who was fully present and deeply private. By the mid-2010, Nicolas Cage's financial difficulties had become a matter of public record. His spending habits on castles, private islands, rare animals, and an extraordinary collection of objects had led to serious financial strain. He owed significant sums in back taxes and had sold off properties to manage the debt. He was also taking on a volume of film roles that critics noted seemed driven more by financial necessity than creative passion. Whether any of this created tension within the marriage is something neither party has publicly addressed. Alice Kim has never spoken about it, and Nicolas Cage has kept those details private as well. What became public knowledge is this. In January 2016, after nearly 12 years of marriage, Alice Kim filed for legal separation from Nicolas Cage. The split was handled without drama on her part, no statements, no interviews, no social media posts. She exited the public narrative as quietly as she had entered it. Alice Kim remains, to this day, one of the most genuinely private figures ever connected to a Hollywood star at that level of fame. She has not pursued a public career. She does not maintain a visible social media presence. She has given no interviews about her marriage, her life with Cage, or her years since the separation. That level of sustained privacy in the current media environment is almost extraordinary in itself. What is known is that she has continued to raise Kal-El, and that both she and Nicolas Cage have, by most accounts, maintained a functional co-parenting relationship. Their son's well-being appears to have been the shared priority. As for Kal-El Coppola Cage, the boy with the Superman name, he turned 20 in October of 2025. He has inherited, by all appearances, something of his father's intensity and his mother's reserved nature. He has stayed out of the spotlight almost entirely, which speaks well of both of his parents. He is not chasing celebrity, he is simply growing up. Nicolas Cage, for his part, went on to marry twice more after Alice, briefly and turbulently to Erica Koik in 2019 and then to Riko Shibata in 2021, with whom he now has a daughter. He has spoken in recent interviews about being in a more settled chapter of his life. Alice Kim remains in the background of all of it, private, unbothered living. It seems exactly the kind of life she always wanted. There is something worth sitting with in this story. Alice Kim had every opportunity to capitalize on her proximity to fame. The interviews, the book deals, the reality television appearances, all of it was available to her, especially after the separation. She chose none of it. She chose her son, her privacy, and her own terms. That choice says something. Not about Nicolas Cage and not about the marriage. It says something about who she was before she ever walked into that restaurant and who she has clearly remained. Celebrity marriages are often treated as entertainment, stories to follow, dissect, and discard when the next one comes along. But behind every headline is a real life being lived by real people. Alice Kim's story is a reminder that not everyone drawn into that world loses themselves to it. Some people walk away intact, and that is its own kind of ending worth respecting. What do you think draws people like Nicolas Cage toward relationships that exist so far outside their world? And in an era where privacy feels almost impossible to hold on to, can you think of anyone who has protected theirs quite as completely as Alice Kim has? Leave your thoughts below.